Hi, and welcome into a Meet Me the Movie Screen Scene Interview Spotlight. This is Thomas Manning, and today we're talking with filmmaker Natalie Erika James. Natalie is the writer and director of the very unique supernatural film Saccharine, and we talk about a little bit of everything throughout this interview, from the marvelous lead performance of Midori Francis to working with practical effects and working with some fake human cadavers. And then we get into the cinematography and the score as well. We cover a lot of ground here. Saccharine premiered earlier this year at Sundance and will be in theaters on May 22nd, with the streaming release to follow in July on the streaming service Shudder. Thank y'all for spending time with us here on Meet Me the Movies, and hope y'all enjoy my conversation with Natalie Erika James, writer and director of Saccharine. Yeah, well, I have to say that unfortunately, I was eating a snack during the opening of this film when I was watching my screener, and I love the way that you just throw everything at the audience right away with
Uh-huh.
the contrast of the beauty, but also the grotesqueness of everyday activities, and specifically as it relates to the human body. So I'll ask, was it always your intention to open the film in that way and just put everything on the table right there?
Yes, actually. Yeah, it was always the opening scene in terms of being thrust into like the middle of one of Hannah's binges, and backwards as well, and then, the full glory of slow-mo as well. I guess I really wanted to convey that sense of like, too much but like never enough, a feeling that can kind of like permeate binges sometimes, where there's a pleasure element and the highs, the sugar high element, but there's also this like sluggishness and oppression to it as well.
Yeah. And with the reverse shot of the jelly kind of going in and out of the donut, I couldn't help but be reminded of Christopher Nolan's early film Memento with there's a
Oh yeah.
reverse firing of the gun.
Sure.
I guess I don't know if that was a specific reference for you, but that's just kind of what I was thinking about.
Yeah, I actually hadn't thought of that. I mean, I love that film,
Yeah.
but yeah,
Yeah.
no, it wasn't like a specific reference. But I guess I always love the idea of the ending always being kind of somewhere in the beginning, right? Or kind of set up in
Right.
the beginning. So
Absolutely. And with casting Midori Francis, I know for much of the runtime, it's just her acting pretty much against
Mhm.
nothing. And she carries a lot of this film on her shoulders. She's alone for a lot of the film.
Yeah.
So can you talk to me about the journey to find her as the lead that you're building your film around?
Yeah, she was really the first person, well, the only person we approached. Like she was our first choice. I had seen her in, a lot of her previous work, and I just find her to be just incredibly like disarmingly authentic, and also just someone who is quite tonally adept, and she kind of she's able to balance humor, I think, with like some pretty intense scenes. And in this, I knew we needed someone who was able to not play for laughs in any way, but still like exist within a horror space, but then also have that like absurd kind of layer on top of that. So yeah, I felt like she was, the like when we found her, I was like, oh, she's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And on the flip side of that, you have Madeleine Madden as the character of Alanya, and she's this is kind of the character who Midori thinks that she wants to be, and
Yeah.
their relationship becomes so crucial to the film thematically. So for you as a director, what did you see in the chemistry between Madeline and Midori that kind of made that on-screen dynamic so successful?
Yeah, it was interesting with casting Alanya. We really wanted someone who, I guess, on one hand, has this almost like out of reach kind of aspirational quality. But a lot of it, I think, is like so much of it is like projected onto her as opposed to being real. And so I wanted someone who had that, veneer of being someone potentially unattainable but still very human and very warm. And I think that's the kind of the unexpected side to Alanya that you start to get to see, that, maybe you think she's someone who lives on the surface, but that she could potentially like be able to see under what's happening for Hannah, and that maybe she has like some insight into that herself. And that I think drives I don't know, it makes it even more tragic in a way that like here's someone who could potentially really understand her if she could only, let herself be fully seen.
Yeah, yeah. And I have a few questions about the cinematography specifically, and I think it was Charlie Saroff who was your DP, and I know you worked
Yeah,
with him previously on Relic.
yeah.
And it's kind of one of those movies where you find yourself looking over your shoulder a few times here and there, and you make use of every corner of the frame, and I think that's something that any good film does, but especially when you're working within the horror genre.
Mhm.
And specifically, I'll ask about working with mirrors and reflections, which is something you do a lot here. I imagine that poses some challenges, but also some creative opportunities for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was one of the, I guess the main kind of horror rules of the film, right? That the ghost is only seen in these convex reflections. And, that com completely was a play on that sense of like body dysmorphia, right? Of like seeing yourself through these warped, I guess, lenses. And it definitely posed some challenges. Like it's really a combination, depending on the size of the surface, of having to use visual effects to help you out as well. But yeah, it's so funny, like thinking of all the ways in which, like for example, the bathroom mirror that flips you upside down, and all of the challenges of like painting out the camera, and the spoon shot, and which ones are actually real reflections versus like plates that we have to get and then comp onto the spoon, and all of those things. Yeah, it's certainly time consuming, but lots of fun. Like it definitely is one of those the visual challenges that make filmmaking kind of enjoyable.
Yeah. And there's another aspect of the visual language that I was especially interested in, which is we see shapes in this film that resemble the human anatomy in everyday life. There's almost like a match cut early on where we see when they're doing the autopsy of the cadaver, there's one of the bones, and then they cut to looking upwards at a winding staircase that kind of looks similarly to that bone.
Mhm.
And then consistently we see shots that highlight the architecture of the city. And that kind of felt like a connection between the architecture of a city and the architecture of the human body. Is
Mhm.
is that kind of what you were getting at? Or am I projecting something here?
No, definitely. And I think like taking that further, a lot of our consideration in the production design for Hannah's apartment was this sense of like bringing the human body into that space. And so a lot of the colors and the textures are very kind of cadaver and flesh-like. The walls are white, and there's a lot of textures that bulge and that, are either high gloss and slick, or kind of lumpy in this kind of body like way. So no, it was certainly like a textural choice that we were trying to bring into like the look of the whole film, as if like her fixation on the body is like permeating every part of the frame.
Right. And you filmed this in your home country of Australia, is that right?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah. Which
we
city
wanted
specifically?
Oh, so we were in Melbourne, but one of the things that we tried to do, it was actually originally set in New York, this story. And I think what we were trying to hold on to was the sense of like a large metropolitan city. And we never explicitly state that it's Melbourne. There's no like trams, digging down the streets or anything like that. But really, I just really wanted the sense of like claustrophobia that was like in the frame. And because of the kind of lighting choices that we were making and the sort of neo-noir kind of pops of color that we were bringing into the look of the film, yeah, I really wanted it to feel, densely metropolitan and like you were in the midst of a large city. And Melbourne is, a large city, but certainly
Right.
not to the state of, New York or
Yeah,
Shanghai.
definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you mentioned some of the digital visual effects earlier, but I really want to talk about some of the practical effects as well. Some of the imagery is quite shocking, but I think the most startling thing about it is, sitting there as a human, knowing that this is what the inside of our bodies look like, or at
Sure.
least, as a cadaver. Um, so can you get into some of the practical design of those images and, what that looked like on set and working with your effects team?
Oh yeah. Yeah, so the Larry at Scarecrow's studios was the prosthetics designer, and he and I worked together on, a relic as well. And yeah, he's just so talented. But he had a mammoth job because he not only had to do Midori's, Hannah's transformation, but also the cadavers and Bertha and the four stages of Bertha as well. But in terms of the cadaver that they're dissecting on set, that was he kind of had to work backwards so that we could actually cut it open on set. And so he would like mold the prosthetic and then flip it over and then fill it out and make everything anatomically correct. And even the rib cage, I think they're like fiberglass ribs that we were able to actually cut on set. So it was kind of like this unpackaging that was happening like live. Yeah, it was amazing. So we were really able to, you have to be so strategic with the camera angles and like shooting it like a stunt basically because it's not something that's repeatable, of course. But yeah, it was pretty full on and just obviously so much better for cast as well to have the something in front of them that like mirrors real life. We definitely took liberties, of course. Real cadavers, a lot of the color is really like sucked out of them, so we took some creative liberties and like pushing things color wise a little. But certainly we were, yeah, trying to stay true to the human body as much as possible. We had like a surgeon, retired surgeon on, like it was our producer's dad, who, was our kind of consultant on set, and that was great.
Yeah. Yeah, and you mentioned the transformation of Midori's character, and obviously
Mhm.
there's some rapid weight loss over the course of the film, and she looks much different at the beginning of the film as compared to the end. I guess for what do you notice about what that requires of an actor who's, you know, acting underneath those prosthetics and then knowing that it's going to be kind of a full arc by the end of the movie? Just as a director, from your perspective, what are some things that you noticed there?
Yeah, well, we definitely had to design the prosthetics in a way that wouldn't encroach on, her expressiveness. I think like that was a massive consideration that you never wanted it to feel like she was, firstly that it looks natural, of course, but also that like everything in her face is like her expressions aren't being kind of blocked in any way, I suppose. I think in terms of a transformation, yeah, we had 7 stages for the prosthetics, but a lot of that is to do with Midori's performance and how she carries herself. And I think we broke down these stages, but there's so much more self-consciousness in the way that she carries herself as Hannah at the start of the film. And that was that's like really technical work that Midori was so prepared for. Like I remember when she walked onto set and we did our first camera test, it kind of just like snapped on. And even just the way that the way that you look down or that you look around the room, the way that posture wise hold your body, like that was all work that she had done before even coming to Australia.
Right, right. And everything visually in this film is complemented by the score from Hannah Peel, and it kind of incorporates this very unsettling, heavy breathing in the audio. And that heavy breathing kind of takes on new meanings over the course of the film as Midori's character goes throughout her arc. Um, so, how did you decide that that was the approach you kind of wanted to take with the soundscape?
Yeah, it was amazing work with Hannah. She's yeah, like it was intensely collaborative and she's so talented. She actually was in some of the playlists that I was listening to when writing the script. So it was kind of an amazing way to, like in some way her work has always been in the DNA of the film, which is cool. But we really wanted to draw from the body and those kind of, I guess, those efforts, whether it's through Hannah's exercise or or how much the voice can convey like tension and breath can convey tension, and lust and all of those different things. So we really just had a breadth of kind of a soundscape to work with that we developed before she started composing. She did all these wonderful sketches. And a lot of that as well was tone pitching in a way where you kind of feel Bertha's presence through those breaths as well. So there's kind of a few different things going on. And I guess for us, trying to relate it to like this idea of food noise, the idea that like a lot of addictions, that there's this kind of this buzz of like want or desire for something, or a need for escape that is represented like orally as well. Yeah, those were the things that we were talking about.
Yeah. And you kind of briefly touched on this earlier. I think you said that one of the crew members' parents was like a surgeon.
Uh-huh.
And as you're making a film about med students, and they're very technically attuned to their science and their craft. And
Hmm.
for you, when you're capturing the accuracy of the lab environment and those experiments, how much was there a lot of research you had to do into figuring
Uh-huh.
out how you wanted to portray that?
Yeah, well, one of the most like meaningful experiences on this shoot was in preparation, we got to visit the dissection halls at the University of Melbourne. And that was pretty amazing. First, like ostensibly it was to check out the location, but it ended up just being an incredible research trip for us and the crew. And it was great because up until that point, all of my research had been, I definitely spoke to a few medical or doctors who'd been to medical school, but a lot of it's kind of online and, actually like TikToks of like a day in the life of a medical student, that kind of stuff was really helpful. But going to this dissection hall was just, yeah, really affirming of all the things that I had researched. And it all felt really accurate, like even down to the fact that they have these memorial services at the end where they invite the families, and so the students can kind of make speeches about the people that they've been dissecting on, and the donors, and just an appreciation for their donation essentially. So that was pretty amazing, but at the same time, like I have to credit the our art department and our production designer Josie, who put so much detail and so many like breakdowns of like the scientific process of like how would you test a substance like ash, and what is the order of like how you would do that. So the chemistry department in at the University of Melbourne also was very generous and like showing us oh, here's what we would do. And I think that machine that's in the film is like, I shudder to think how much that costs because that is all.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. And I mentioned the relationship between Midori and the character of Madeline, but there's another kind of emotional core is Midori's character's relationship with her parents, which is quite a complicated relationship. And um, can briefly, can you talk about casting her parents and kind of honing in on that relationship and pulling on some of those, emotional strings there?
Yeah, we definitely it's so odd to cast, not saying my parents are exactly the same in the film. Obviously things are pushed a little bit. But yeah, it's so strange casting off of, the base of, someone who's real in your head. But yeah, I felt like Shoko is such a, yeah, wonderful, performer, and I love her the sense of like, I guess the the kind of peaks and like valleys in the energy, you know, like I think she has such, I don't know, to me she has this kind of um such a endearing quality, which obviously like her love is shown in such intense ways that can, you know, be controlling in Hannah's mind. So she's kind of at once this like, I don't know, she brings such a levity to it, but then she's also this quite an oppressive force as well. So I liked the like the duality of that character and Shoko being able to like carry that. And Rob Taylor, I think, is just did so much with such you know, I think we only see him really for one scene, and we so get a sense of like the depth of his loneliness, even though, you know, it's not really oh, even though it comes out in like anger. So I don't know. I thought they both were incredible, and yeah, were really like respectful and very much like, yeah, I don't know how to say, like I don't know. Those are probably some of the hardest scenes to shoot for me, I'd say. Like
Yeah,
just in
yeah,
terms of, you know, being in that house set and the darkness of it, and this, you know, this sense of like, I don't know, grief for like what was once alive, and you know what was becoming this kind of, I guess we described it as like a house in stasis. That was our kind of approach to it, and like the clock's not working, and things are just kind of the same as they were maybe like 15 years ago.
yeah,
Yeah, that was our approach.
yeah, yeah. Well, I know we've got to wrap it up here, but thank you so much for your time, Natalie. It was a
Yeah,
privilege, and hopefully we share more conversations in the future.
yeah, thanks so much, Thomas.
Yeah.
Great
Won't
chat.
you come and meet me at the movies? Won't you come and watch a